Hi, Jochen.
Hey Leslie.
How are
Oh,
you?
I'm good. I quickly used the restroom and now now I feel like it's settled down.
Good, great. Yeah,
Oh,
looking forward to this conversation. So,
yeah. Um, I'm just gonna ask, is there any any place that comes to your consciousness as like a good starting place?
well, I figure we could just kind of uh, dive in. I will say there are a couple things after listening to yours and Michael's talk that jumped out at me that I thought were interesting. And towards the end there, when you were talking about truth and challenge in friendships, versus love and care.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought those were uh, interesting concepts. Um, and then also the idea of, different types of friendships
Hmm.
and which require, different levels of commitment and energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really, I thoroughly enjoyed that discussion, and how it also interwove different types of relationships too. So,
Um, yeah, I'm happy to, take up of the things you brought up any of these aspects and start there and then pick our way through the landscape.
yeah, yeah,
We
yeah,
go
for
from
sure.
one berry bush to the next one.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. Um, well, I mean, shall I just dive in with some of
Yeah,
my own experiences
yeah,
and just kind of do that? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so when you and Michael talked about truth and challenge versus love and care, um, I kind of reflected back on some of my own friendships, right? And I feel as if love and care is the foundation that opens up and allows room for truth and challenge.
hmm,
Because the love and care kind of, for me, has to sort of be there first. And through that, trust is created. If I love someone and care for them, I'm going to extend them my willingness to trust, and hopefully they will do the same. And then, when we get into tangles or some conflicts, that is when, because the trust is there and the love and care is there, I don't want to leave that conflict unaddressed or
hmm,
unresolved.
hmm,
And so then I will use, some truth and challenge to be able to do that.
hmm. And in our relationship right now in this conversation, I at least feel maybe not a chip on my shoulder, but
Hmm.
at least a little bit like, okay, because Leslie, I can very much resonate, really take and resonate with the perspective that you just offered, by which for two people who are initially strangers who don't know each other,
Hmm.
but who are then coming into the same space context through happenstance, right? Because you can't plan meeting a person that you don't yet know. I mean, or at least there's something that brings them together. And of course, it
Hmm.
could be you see someone's profile on a website and think that person is interesting, but at least that first initial exposure is still probably just like more or less happenstance, right?
Yeah.
But then whatever brings you together, that's how I hear you, is already a kind of willingness to extend to the other person some kind of permission to enter your space and to interact with you and all of these things. And that requires this very basic love, care, compassion, spaciousness,
Mhm.
that kind of attitude or approach. And as I said, yeah, I resonate with and really believe that it is absolutely my preference for relationships to form, develop, and be started that way.
Mhm.
And I'm also trying to, at least very, very briefly, put not so much as a challenge, but at least as a question really of curiosity. Can friendships also arise out of tension? Where
Hmm.
the very first moment of encounter is one of maybe not like yelling at someone, you idiot,
Yeah. But there's a tension there, maybe.
where it starts from a tension and
Hmm.
maybe the recognition this is a tension worth resolving. Because
Hmm.
at least that for me is on the flip side of it, right? So I have love and care, and it starts there.
Hmm.
And comes the tension, the tangling comes about. For
Hmm.
that then to be resolved, I would at least then posit it to you, and maybe we can play with that a little bit. But I'm also happy to first still like explore the love and care fully. But the maybe even like the joy, the anticipation of joy of resolving the tangle. And if
Hmm.
that is missing, and I'm conceiving of this tension and tangles as undesirable, right? This feeling of everything should be harmonious, everything should be fluffy and loving and caring and warm and cottony. As I then get into these tangles, it really gets much harder to resolve them if my expectation is that it should always be this fluffy thing. Whereas
Right.
if I on the flip side, I have this thing like, no, 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 every tension and tangle is something to really kind of have fun with, then I can at least imagine that even a relationship that starts in a tassel of sort,
Hmm.
no, a
Hmm.
tussle.
Hustle. Yeah.
I can then still develop within that initial interaction precisely the care and love because I'm so joyfully engaged with it.
Yeah. So that speaks to the attitude that one brings to their relationships in general.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that is probably that basic attitude that a person brings to their relationships in general is informed by a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Hmm.
Other life experiences,
Oh yeah.
what their initial experience of relationship was growing up,
Uh-huh.
friendships as children, and this sort of thing, right? Yeah, yeah. Some people will run away from those tussles at the very beginning and decide the person is not worth it because of the threat or discomfort they feel. And, we'll just say, I don't want to deal with you. Goodbye,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
which is probably mostly, I see that happening a lot. Um, but the joy, and then there are other people who love to fight, the joy of the of the tussle, as you say. Because that can spark an aliveness in the relationship that can bring some energy to it.
Yeah. And
Um,
as you're saying that, I'm remembering just quickly, like another friend of mine and I had a conversation a while ago, and he said literally, "Oh yeah, whenever I can feel this sparring, I feel
mhm.
particularly at home because that is his experience of his childhood home, that there was a lot of that going on, and
Yeah.
that kind of actually was more a predictor of the health of the relationship. Because
Hmm.
when people didn't talk to one another, that suggested real problems. But as long as they were still like at each other's not throats, but at least they were doing like butting their heads. That really meant this is good.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I know like John Gottman talks about three different relational styles. And one of them is the passionate relator who enters into friendships or relationships with a lot of passion and wants that sparring. And then there's also the others that are just comfortable avoiders that don't want to fight, that will sweep things under the rug, and that's okay. They'll forget about it and move on. And then you have the ones that are really into processing and communicating, not with so much passion, but they're certainly not, they're sort of the intellectual processors and communicators. I think
Mhm.
that's how they work through relationships. Yeah. So, so it's interesting what that brings up is okay, so you have two people trying to form a friendship or relationship who have different styles.
And my immediate curiosity is almost how much can a person learn to, at the very least, let's say, enjoy the other person's style, even if it isn't their own style,
Mhm.
and how much, and that's might go as well into speaking about the different qualities or types of friendship. If people have different styles, whether that might make it difficult to develop a certain quality or kind of friendship out of the differences of styles.
Mhm. Yeah, possibly. I think it depends on a level of awareness of this, how open someone is, and what it is actually that draws people together. It is interesting because I think people of different styles can be sort of just magnetically drawn together in a way as friends because there's something I believe that I'm drawn to people in my life out of maybe something that there's there for me to learn. There's something for them to learn from me. We're there to learn from each other. And there's something in our, um, I don't know, you could call it unconscious or soul connection, or, if you want to get really woo about it. Um, there's something there that draws us together. And we may have very different styles. Um, I mean, I know that right now I'm involved in a lot of Terry Reel's work. He's formed this organization called the Relational Life Institute, and he does a type of therapy called relational life therapy. And I've been studying, taking several of his classes and want to study with him more in depth. And he just talks about how we are drawn to relationships to finish our unfinished business.
Mhm.
Whether that be, friendships, intimate relationships. Yeah.
I'm chuckling because it it tallies with my experience of what I might call irrational attraction. So I think I am attracted to certain people because it is fun or because uh, they have resources that I might be able to use or whatever the reason might be. And then I seem to also have at times more irrational attractions where even
Mhm.
if someone were to ask me, so like, why this person or like you know, what makes that so fascinating? All I could say is just like gravity.
Right.
Whatever word I would use to describe would no longer be easily inquirable
Mhm.
through further conversation until I actually point not the light outside, but inside. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, what I call unfinished business is just something that needs resolution within my own inner experience. And it comes more out as a projection, as though I'm having the experience. The other person has some kind of quality that would most of the time, I think, reduce some sort of discomfort within my soul. And to the extent that I'm exposed to them, they will take care of that discomfort for me. And it feels in that regard more like a crutch.
Yeah.
And
Well, and that's
obviously,
the setup.
in the moment of describing it as like falling for someone, right? Or like having this experience of like, oh my goodness, yeah, this person I love, or whatever it is.
Mhm,
In that moment, it certainly doesn't appear to my consciousness. I'm just like fixing up a problem in myself, right?
mhm,
But especially when it becomes a and you know, for those listening, so you are a professional in the field. That doesn't mean that you necessarily have come across the term, but I'm going to ask
mhm.
whether you've heard the term limerence. This
I
term of-
haven't.
okay, so like when I went through what I think this word describes, it's really a an unhealthy fixation on a person of a past or broken up relationship that still commands more or less vast amounts of attention grabbing
Mm,
during awake experience. So that whenever your mind is not immediately occupied by a task, it will wander invariably to this person as like a both source of despair and potential source of bliss,
mhm,
and will
mhm,
create this binary of like my
mm.
life sucks without them and my life would be fully actualized with them, right?
Ah,
And
yeah,
so I've been in this state many years ago, and looking back, it absolutely it's like being spellbound in a certain way.
yeah,
But
yeah.
then to understand that the spell is actually something that lies in one's past, and that the spell has been cast in a certain way
Mhm,
way before you ever met this person.
mhm,
And everything that they actually do is like touch on that point or on this aspect of inner experience, and they're able to bring it into a certain kind of awareness where once it is there, it becomes almost unbearable to no longer pay attention to it. And still, the entire attention is projected onto the other person as kind of like this, like solution to a kind of inner problem.
yeah, that's really interesting having it framed that way. Yeah. They're going to solve my problems for me. They're going to, this is, sort of also when describes this feeling of they're going to complete me in some way.
And it's a very random thought, but at least
Yeah.
have you watched the movie What About Bob?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Then given that you are a professional in this domain, I know people who love it, I know people who hate it, but it's like really a patient becoming completely over-attached to their therapist
Oh, I have to watch that.
and going to great lengths to really kind of like and that's the thing. Like thinking about that movie right now, I would even say that from the person's perspective who is pursuing the therapist, they may even have the experience, oh, I just want to be friends with my therapist. And so clearly I'm gonna go out of my way to really kind of inject myself into their life because like I could be, whatever. And I'm not saying that that is that characters or that the writers had that in mind, but I can certainly see that from the individual's perspective who is pursuing someone out of this unconscious desire to fix a problem, they can come up with all kinds of interesting narratives that justify the strangest behaviors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, when you think about I mean, so that makes me think of what it is to like be a therapist as opposed, or to go see a therapist as opposed to having really good friends, you know. And what comes to mind when I think of that is Peter Limberg's idea of friends of virtue,
Hmm.
and how friends of virtue uh, can actually, if you have enough friends of virtue, you might not need to go see a therapist because they're providing that connection, they're providing that level of deep exploration, or there's a arena there for some deep exploration with someone else. you know,
Hmm.
someone who you trust, someone who has your best interest, your back, who has your back, and you can really open up and share with them. And sometimes that's all that's needed to resolve something within oneself. And they will confront you on your bullshit, which is the truth challenge
Hopefully,
place.
hopefully,
Hopefully,
yeah.
a friend of virtue will, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, right. Whereas you pay a therapist to open up, bare your heart to them, open up your soul, have them join with you, support you, validate you, and then confront you, which is what we look for. I mean, what I look for in friendships.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Which at least brings up for me then an interesting question.
Mhm.
What are the aspects of friendship that can and cannot be, well, sublimated sounds like such a almost cruel word, but at least that can be offloaded or at least be recovered to quite some extent through, let's say, a therapy or coaching or otherwise professional counseling like relationship. Whereas what are some aspects that really where if you don't have friends are very difficult to really kind of get to?
Yeah. Well, okay, so where counseling and coaching can come in handy is looking at why don't you have friends? What? I mean, really, what is it that has kept you from developing relationships? What's getting in the way of that? And that opens up, the box of all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Traumas, fears, risk avoidance, um, uh, anxieties, depressions. I mean, all of those comorbid things that stem from what I think is just either pretty severe traumas or just a series of little T traumas growing up that led to some adaptive responses and behaviors in childhood, which get carried on into adulthood. Worked great in childhood as a way to survive and get through, but does not work as an adult in relationships.
I do feel that there's, for me personally, definitely a very rich still ground to be explored around what you just described
Hmm.
for the most part, because looking back into my own autobiography, like what happened to me when I was younger, or like the choices that I made when I was younger, really about the choices more than just like my environment, is that indeed, yeah, during my, like early mid-adolescence and even early adulthood, I would say until certain, yeah, no, I would say until about that I came to the United States at age 32.
Hmm.
Um, it's not as though I didn't have any friends,
Hmm.
but would I have like self-described, let's say, the year before moving to New York, that I said I had friends who really kind of like I felt what's it called? No holds barred, like where everything was fair game in terms of my experience describing to them. And
Hmm.
besides, I feel already incredibly like deep gratitude now towards one of my brothers because we both lived in the same city. And when we were kids, our relationship was really very tense, lots of tussles.
Hmm.
When we both lived in that city as adults, we grew very close, where we would visit each other at least once, twice a week. So we lived by bus over an hour apart, and yet I would do that, or he would, come visit me.
Hmm.
And we then shared. So, for instance,
Hmm.
he was one of the first people that no, I didn't go into any detail about like my homosexuality and like what I was doing or hoping to do, but at least he knew I was gay, was like almost no one else in my life at the time knew
Hmm.
about that, right? And so
Hmm.
even there, I feel that my brother was someone that I could talk to about stuff. And I had
Hmm.
one other really good friend with whom I had phone calls, I would say at least every other week, maybe once a week, and sometimes we would speak 3, 4 hours on the phone.
Hmm. Mhm.
But it then still took me, and I think, yes, the coming out experience I've had here in New York City with colleagues and then that turned into friends,
Mhm.
I would indeed say that this process of revealing aspects of myself that until that moment I had considered shameful,
Mhm.
something like that, was really instrumental in me learning, even just like I wouldn't even say that, okay, I came here, I came out, and then I knew how to make friends. No, I
Right.
would say like by coming out, I then was in the position of learning how to make friends. And that until then, I would just consider myself as someone who just didn't have lots of friends. And it was just like not even something that I think, looking back, I recognized as something that I could change if I wanted to. So I didn't even have any awareness that that might change. I simply looked at my life as like, I don't make friends easy, and that's
Mhm.
okay. And too bad for me. I have to
Mhm.
get through with this anyway. So just let's continue. Right. There
Mhm.
was just no even imagination. Oh,
Mm.
yeah, like I
Which is,
could, I could learn how to make friends and it would feel so great. And then my life will be way better.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. So it sounds like there was just an acceptance there of this is just who I am. There's no, I just don't have friends, and
Let's
this
say
is
resignation.
a resignation. Oh, a resignation. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay, so the therapist in me wants to get into that, but I'm going to resist.
No, it's like if you feel, because I'm also very happy, Leslie, to just talk as friends. And
Yeah.
like not for you to therapize me, but to at least use your prodigious experience and skills as a friend, to point things out.
Okay.
That is very welcome on my end.
Well, okay, so I'll generalize what I'm thinking then a little bit of the role that knowing ourselves plays in friendships and our ability to initiate relationships with other people. Um, what I guess where what I'm pondering here and maybe wanting to play with a little bit is how if we are shutting off or not fully expressing aspects of ourselves to others, um, how that might get in the way of being able to really relate fully, authentically, congruently with other people and form those kinds of friendships that are meaningful, deep, helpful, supportive. I mean,
Mhm.
if I'm going to show up as someone, and I mean, we do this, I think we do this in life anyway, in all kinds of different relationships, is we definitely leave parts of us ourselves at the door that might not be appropriate in certain contexts or what we have been trained to believe is not appropriate. Um, but if I'm only bringing a part of myself to a relationship, then that person doesn't fully know me, right? They know a part of me, but do they really know me?
And I want to let you completely develop that thought, and then I have at least a now genuine curiosity question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, in one of the spaces that I go to regularly,
Mhm.
there is a little bit of or maybe not just a little bit, but one of the tenets of the space is that we cannot help but inhabit a role, a character.
Mhm.
And that to the extent clearly that we have a belief that, oh, ideally I should be the same character everywhere,
Mhm.
like this kind of idea with like there is an authentic self and that is who I am. And if I bring that authentic self to every situation, that would be good for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that space that I go to would say, let's not do that.
Yeah,
And
no,
and
no.
and instead simply accept
Mhm.
that in different spaces, your story will at least be the character that you inhabit in your life story will vary from space to
Mhm.
space. So that
Yeah.
when you go to your church meeting, you
Mhm.
will be a different character than when you go to talk to your lawyer or to your spouse or to your boss or
Yeah.
to your kids or to any given friend that you have. And that in a different relationship, there's at least no requirement to really be exactly the same character that you would inhabit in the various stories that you're part
Right.
of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. For sure. For sure.
And
Yeah.
now one step further, that in that space it might be more important to fully appreciate the nature of the character that in any given story you inhabit,
Mhm.
and that you own that character. That is to say, if you happen to be in a relationship where you are called to be the tough guy, because it just requires a tough guy in that moment in that story for the story to progress, then you
Mhm.
better own being the tough guy. And that doesn't mean you have to be cruel or like, like intentionally hurt the other person, but at least to recognize in this moment in this story, what is called for is a tough guy, and I will inhabit that character to the best of my abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. So so what that sparks in me in the moment is this idea of so now I'm going to kind of go into a bit of internal family systems theory about the notion of self and being self-led and being known. And what you're speaking to here, I think, is the different parts that show up in different contexts and being able to be aware of those parts in those contexts and their appropriateness or inappropriateness, and fully embrace and own those parts and show up fully with them in a healthy way.
Mhm.
Some of them are not so healthy. I mean, some of them take on roles and jobs that are not healthy for the person or for a relationship or for, but yes, I definitely resonate with this idea that we do leave certain aspects of our personality and selves at the door in different contexts. I mean, I'm not going to go talk to my boss about all my personal intimate details with my husband, for example. That would be inappropriate. you know. At least not in the society or cultural norms we currently have. So right, but and so then that what comes to mind when I say that is I am showing up authentically within the context of where I'm where I am, fully with my work self, and I'm going to be fully in my work self, and I'm going to engage with people in from that part of myself. Some of them I may actually become friends with.
Mhm.
There might be something beyond this work relationship that we see in one another, that we have some commonalities or we have some coherence around, that we can form a different kind of relationship.
And one
Yes.
additional thought that I just want to see, yeah, what your take on this is. My intuition is that the people I enjoy interacting with the most, they can be really very, very different from one another. So I don't have a type and like it's only this type of person I enjoy interacting with, but a person that I can grasp. And by that I mean they don't try to slip through my fingers as I'm
Hmm.
trying to understand and actually really kind of get in good contact with. I want to be in good, secure
Yeah.
contact with my understanding of who they are. And for that, it really is important that they don't, in one situation, show up, let's say, as this kind of, you know, very strong and determined and whatever. And as soon as I then, oh, so you're this determined person. So with you, I can be a bit more robust. And then all of a sudden, no, 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 I'm a victim. And like, you can't really talk to me like that. It's just like,
Yeah, yeah.
That
Hmm.
is very disconcerting because I then am like trying to understand, so are you more like the victim type or more the strong I'm rattling the cage kind of type, right? So for me, the switching,
Hmm.
that makes it very difficult to enjoy relationship because then I'm always like really uncertain, okay, who am
Right.
like am I at least talking to a single person here?
Right, right, right. Who's going to show up in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And of course, if the other person tells me in advance, oh yeah, today I'm gonna like try three character types that I want to experiment with, then it's totally fine.
Hmm.
But I generally have a some preference for knowing the other person, understanding them.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some consistency there
Yeah.
that you're looking for. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And I think our different aspects of our personality can show up in different scenarios, even within the same friendship.
Yeah.
But what what I think you're speaking to is just this general sort of hum of the person that is consistent throughout. And that's what you have the grasp of.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
and I do accept or like even welcome that this obviously means the other person also has a grasp on me,
Mhm.
which really means that they can,
Yeah.
they can use their ability of talking and acting in order to influence me in a way, right? They can literally almost like in a dance or in a jujitsu move or aikido move, they can throw me on the proverbial mat
Mhm.
because they know me.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
One sometimes knows, let's say, my preferences and roughly my morality and how I proclaim this is how I want to live my life. I
Mhm.
want that person to be able to then say, yeah, but here you're not doing it.
Right. Mhm.
Because otherwise, if I then say, oh, yeah, but that's an exception,
Yeah.
it's just like, okay, but you told me you always want to be this and this, and now you're not doing it. Yeah, yeah, but like, whatever.
Mhm.
That for me is this kind of slippery thing where I'm like, it makes it very difficult to really kind of have a conversation where I feel the other person is honest or something, or, you know,
Mhm. Right, right. So that's where your truth and challenge comes in, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
because I do at least conceive of life, a little bit like maybe like an Aikido dojo studio where, yeah, to the extent that I am becoming better at dealing with life's challenges, it requires almost a little bit of training
Mhm.
through the interaction with other people
Mhm.
who point out to me, I think you're not moving particularly smartly there and there. And it would be so much better for you if you learned this and this move. What do you make of that? Do you want to practice a little bit?
Right. Yeah, welcome to couples counseling. No, but in all seriousness, yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, right. So part of a good friendship then, a solid friendship is being able to give and receive feedback
Hmm.
around how you might be impacting one another. And is that how you want to show up for one another? Right.
Yeah.
And learning those moves or those skills of relating in which you can deepen the quality of the relationship, the friendship.
And I'm the words that you used, impacting one another,
Mhm.
that still resonates because I sense that that's a very, very important piece
Mhm.
that I still struggle with because it is much easier to express whenever I feel impacted to
Mhm.
express that as you are wrong because you're not doing whatever, 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 rather than saying, hey, I'm impacted in this way, and can we at least talk about whether you know that I'm impacted in this way and like whether you might be willing to change anything if you, now that you know it, actually don't want me to be impacted that way, right? That's a very different proposition to make.
Exactly. And that comes with owning your own experience, right? Like I'm not going to expect you to be responsible for my internal experience.
Hmm.
But if I'm going to have a relationship with you, I'm in order for the relationship to be a uh, deep, caring, trusting one, I will need to share that with you.
Hmm.
And that may be unpleasant to hear. And then of course we can talk about it, we can explore it. You can decide if it's information for you that is helpful and that how you want to, if it's in line, if making changes is more in line with how you really want to show up in the world and be in the world with people, then great. You've just had the opportunity to get some feedback about that and make some adjustments. If not, then that is certainly a choice too. It's like, hey, I'm sorry you're feeling this way, but this is my sovereignty and this is who I am, and I don't want to make that change. Right? So there's um it can get kind of complex and tricky sometimes,
Hmm.
right?
And
Yeah.
one of the topics you started out with, the different types of friendship or different
Mhm.
roles that friends play, for me almost has a little bit to do with, and it's mostly unspoken between me and my friends, I would say, an unspoken agreement into which domains of life I will extend this push and pull between us, right? So if, for instance, it could be a friendship that's just around, oh, what books do you read?
Yeah.
To the extent that at some point I feel the other person is more and more presenting me with books that I find totally boring, then
Hmm.
I may in that domain say, hey, like let's look at some more interesting books.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't start of a sudden to give the person unsolicited financial advice or
Right.
marriage counseling or who knows what, right? It is just not part of that friendship.
Right. Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so I'm trying to still like figure out for myself in another conversation I've already mentioned that in the past, once I had learned how to make friends,
Hmm.
and it had really become a source of really great improvement of my life quality. My life just got more alive. Good.
Hmm. Expanded, richer, all of
And
that.
then there was a phase where I had this notion, oh, now that I know how to do this, let's expand every friendship as far as it can go
Mm-hmm.
into as many domains as possible and into as deep as possible. And that is luckily no longer like a pursuit of mine.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm at least curious if in your, yeah, just like experience, how do you yourself make decisions about, precisely because it is hardly ever explicitly mentioned between friends, oh, we are friends about gardening and this. Okay, like let's write that down and don't forget about it, right? You don't do that with people.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
instead,
Yeah.
did you have any intuition how those decisions come about where you kind of just do you just
Yeah, I think for me, in my own experience, it's been a felt sense of like uh, uh, for example, I'll just throw an example out there. Um, In my 20s, mid 20s, I think I was 25 at the time, I got really interested in astrology. And so I went and I took an astrology class, and I made some really good friends. In fact, I made a best friend. That was the first, that was the place where I met her initially. And and there was a felt sense I had about her that was, okay, I really want to get to know this person. Um, and there were other people in the class I didn't feel that way about, yet they were friends of sort. We have this common interest. We get together and we talk about it outside of the class. Um, but I didn't really see myself, spending a lot of time hanging out with them or traveling with them or any of that like I did with this other person, with my best friend, who's still my best friend today. Um, and we've had our tangles, and we've even had a period of cutoff and then came back together after many years. But it was a felt sense. There was just something there that wanted to explore. And these things really aren't made explicit. At least it wasn't between her and me until after a certain time in the friendship when we would talk about that, what it was that drew us to each other.
Hmm.
And for her, it was something different, which was interesting. We had an we had a group of us women went up to Vancouver, BC to party for our birthdays. And um, she had way too much. She overindulged, and I ended up escorting her, getting a taxi, taking her back to the hotel, um, cleaning her up, putting her in bed, putting a bucket next to the bed, and then I left. I said, I'll see you later, because I still wanted to go and have fun. And for her, that was the moment that she decided I was a good friend, because I didn't sacrifice my fun for her.
Hmm.
She didn't have to feel responsible for that. She didn't have to, feel guilty about anything. She
Hmm.
saw that I could stand on my own, have my own sovereignty, set my own boundaries, yet care for her at the same time. Right. So that was something that solidified our friendship in that way. So that I think I think the difference there between, say, your book club friends who you talk about books with and decide what books you're going to read, and you may dip your toe into some personal things as they are relevant to maybe what you just read. That's kind of how that comes up. The difference between that and these really solid friendships of virtue, deeper friendships, are these kind of moments, right? Where something happens, and it's the way that you each respond to the thing
Hmm.
that might make you go, wow, this is my person. This could be my person.
Um, I I am frequently reminded of literature references. This brings to mind the line from the first year Harry Potter book, where J.K. Rowling says, they're just like some situations that if you live through them, you can't help but ending up being friends. And
Right.
that sounds like this, right? Where you and this person were in a context and you both acquitted yourself of the challenge, she in her own way, maybe not contributing as much effort, but she went through it with you and you
Mhm,
with her.
mhm,
And by virtue of coming out the other side in a particular manner where she felt she can trust that you wouldn't ever guilt trip her because
mhm,
of something, wow, okay, that's the person.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, I feel a little bit like prying, but I will at least ask whether you would want to share not so much how the friendship like got into like a state of like not being active, but what allowed you and what led to the rekindling? Because
Yeah,
I
repair.
imagine that certainly it's interesting for me, but that might be something of interest for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, again, I think it was life circumstances. Um, yeah, we ended up sharing, so we ended up going into the same grad program for counseling. She was a year behind me. Um, but we were in the same program, and once she had graduated, we ended up sharing some office space. And there were some client referrals back and forth. And there was a falling out over that around what she considered, what was considered confidentiality. And she got really angry with me over something and cut me off and said, "That's it, I can't do this." And so several years went by, and then we both ended up having children right around the same time. Her son was born in January, my daughter was born in June of the same year. And I got a letter from her, a handwritten letter in the mail. This was before people had emails. And she wrote me an apology letter and said she wanted to connect. And I mean, this had been a real source of pain for me for many years because I had felt so deeply connected to her. And so I immediately set up an email address because she had done so and gave it to me at the end of the letter. So I immediately set up an email address and reconnected with her. And so she came and she brought me a big pot of soup right after my daughter was born, and we visited for a couple hours, and then we didn't see each other again for a long time because she fell into a real depressive state, which was sad, and she didn't tell me about it. And then she kind of reemerged again right as I was moving from Snohomish, Washington, down to Portland. And right before the move, she invited me over with my kids. And so we had dinner and we talked. And that was sort of a reconnection, so that every time I traveled up to Seattle to visit my mom, I would look her up and we would get together. And eventually we talked about what happened. And what it was for her is, well, what it was for both of us, I will say, is we each owned our own stuff.
Mhm.
Okay. She owned that um, there were, see, I had gotten married at a certain point and she felt me slipping away. And she owned how she was missing me. She was sad that the amount of time we had spent together, this kind of thing had changed. Um, and so she really didn't know how to deal with it. And so she just cut me out. And her life has been full of all kinds of traumas. It's amazing she has gotten through and is as functional and insightful, and it's amazing she's the person she is uh, become based on what she has had to live through. It's quite extraordinary, actually. And so she just didn't know how to address this with me other than just cutting me out of her own
Mhm.
anger. So she owned that. And I owned my piece around maybe crossing some confidentiality boundaries. And I learned a big lesson around that and was actually grateful to what had happened for that lesson. So I think we were both able to own our stuff and then also see the bigger picture, sort of find the silver lining and then come back together. And it actually deepened our friendship. I mean, it actually really strengthened it and deepened it. The
Mhm.
point where, I mean, she's a person where I can just call her up or reach out in any point in time and she will be there like that. And same, I will do the same for her.
One of the, and I don't want to just move on. So because I still feel there is potentially energy around like getting over the cut or the crack, the breaking, and
Mhm.
the process of mending, and that is very, very interesting. And yet I want to at least put already kind of a pin into what are the kinds of, because I think you used the word something like the things she had to live through. And I'm wondering what are both in your professional experience, but then also really intuitively things that make being in friendship, especially in virtuous friendship, what are some things that make that difficult? And from your experience, really,
Mhm.
if I meet someone like that and I recognize, okay, they likely have this thing going on for them, what
Mhm.
can a particularly virtuous friend potentially offer to really kind of say, not let me carry that for you, but
Mhm.
ultimately almost the invitation for the other person to own that,
Mhm.
as hard as that may initially seem. But like what might be successful strategies that help people to own these things? But I want to really come back to
Mhm.
the almost the process of owning that. Like what does it look like, and how does it really change then the ability to reconnect in the friendship?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when somebody can so there's a level of awareness there, right? There's a level of commitment to one's own growth and commitment to wanting to expand one's own awareness into oneself that provides an affordance to receive feedback. So if someone is if someone is behaving or lashing out at me or projecting onto me or behaving in a way that is um, where I have to look at that and go, okay, is there something here for me to learn? Maybe there is. Okay, I want to learn that. And also, wait a minute, that's them, right? There's this discernment of what's mine to own and what's theirs to own, right? And so if I can say, oh, thank you for that feedback, this part of it is really important to me. This part resonates, and I'm going to definitely take it and use it to grow. But this bit over here, I would invite you maybe to take a look at that because that's not feeling quite right.
Hmm.
I'm wondering where that, I'm curious about how you come to that conclusion about me or about, where does that come from?
Hmm.
So I think there's a curiosity there to answer the first part of your question of how do you get someone to really kind of, or how do you get someone is kind of a, I'm going to make you do this thing,
Guilty as charged.
right? It's more how do I maybe have some influence in a way that will serve, maybe help this person or support them in deeper discovery, and also in the process of that, serve our relationship, serve our friendship too. And
And I just want to point out, really, like this was, thank you, Leslie. This because I frequently still have exactly that experience where I want to get people to dot dot
Mhm.
dot whatever.
Yeah,
And coming back 2 minutes earlier, right? If I can fully own that,
hmm,
then I'm no longer in the same predicament because I don't have
right,
to get them to anything because
right,
I'm owning what is happening.
exactly.
Right? So as soon as I fully own what is going on my side, they can do whatever they want.
That's right.
And of course, I may still feel playfully curiosity driven, like, wouldn't it be nicer if we both dot dot dot? But
Right.
that's a very different proposition than like, you
Yeah.
better dot dot dot, right?
That's a whole different proposition. There's a whole different energy behind it. There's a whole different internal experience behind that. Right. Curiosity versus control.
Hmm.
Control being a losing strategy in just about any relationship. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And like with how I conceive of all of my choices, I am probably trying to control or manipulate some aspect of reality, right? If I pick up an object, right, and then I'm holding it, I want to control what's happening with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems almost natural to me that that is just like how my nervous system even engages with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
The question is maybe what exactly it is that I'm feeling I want to control.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I respond to the fact that that part which I want to control is alive?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's two aspects that
Yeah.
can be different. One is I want to control the relationship
Mm-hmm.
by actually improving the relationship and getting the relationship into a certain state. And not so much I want to control the other person, right? I want to make the relation, I want to upgrade the relationship. That's my intention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And then if I can see that not only is the other person alive, but even the relationship itself has a quality of aliveness to it,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I will more engage with that, fully understanding that, yeah, I may want to get it in this direction, but it may as well end up there. And let's see what happens. So
Mm-hmm.
the expectation around how successful my control attempts are, they will be very different.
Right. Right. Right.
Just as, when I approach a cat on the street or like on a field somewhere, and then, oh, it would be so lovely if I could pet the cat because I want to have this fluffy relationship with the cat. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if I then put the cat into a cage just so that I can pet it, it
Mm-hmm.
will not be a very fluffy relationship, despite the
Mm-hmm.
fact that I may get to pet it, right? So, and I just
Yeah.
have to have that understanding about
Yeah.
the
That
relation.
cat's gonna scratch you, possibly bite you because it's in a cage. Right? Yeah, right. See, yeah, there's a difference between influence and impacting the relationship field itself versus the other person, trying to control the behaviors and thoughts, feelings of another person, right? The desire to influence and impact the relationship comes from, for me anyway, an internal inquiry into what can I do to serve this relationship? Which will be, which of course will include how do I interact with this person across from me such that our relationship is well served? Do I try to change their behavior so that I'll be more comfortable with it and it'll be more acceptable to me? Or do I make clear requests about what I want?
Mhm.
See what happens.
And an image that came up for me a couple minutes ago, uh, I know very little about it other than that it exists. Some disease, and I forget even the name, but by which people have a bone structure where the bones break incredibly easily, right? It's like this,
The osteoporosis, is that what?
like glass bone, or like it's literally like a genetic, I think, disease by which typically people don't get very old. But if
Mhm.
I imagine, for instance, someone has that kind of internal psychological structure, so they have
Yeah.
very fragile
Mhm.
psychology.
Easily activated and
And then I approach them.
yeah.
And so for me, it's almost like, and it's even harder to probably communicate, let alone make visible and explicit. But how do I communicate with someone who maybe not in their entire body, right? But at least, let's say, in their arms from the elbow to the wrist and in their ankles. They
Mm-hmm.
really have some issues. And then I want to dance with them.
Mm-hmm.
How
Mm-hmm.
do I communicate to them what I want? I
Mm-hmm.
want I want to have a fun dance. And
Mm-hmm.
how do they communicate back to me? I've had really bad experiences dancing,
Yeah.
broke my wrists a couple times, and I'm not really looking forward to you breaking my wrists.
Right.
And so like
That's clear.
and so
Mhm.
if I try to apply this to psychology, and I don't know, like, because I now have this feeling of I could learn a lot from your experience as a therapist if you could tell me a little bit about where you think what are the kinds of injuries that people have that
Yeah.
make this dance difficult, and
Yep.
how could I even try to find this out? Because they may not be in a position to communicate about it, given their frustration that they've had all their life with not being able
Yeah.
to express to people where they need to be careful about.
Yeah. 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 Right. Yeah, that's hard when they can't when if they're in a position where they can't communicate it. So, so the things that I think on a psychological level create these breaks, right? These really fragile bones, if you will, are, really heavy traumas, betrayal traumas, especially, where someone who has had a lot of trust or has needed the care and affection of a parent, small children, have put their trust and faith in that their parents are going to take care of them and they don't. That's the first kind of big betrayals, right? And then there's adaptations that a child develops in order to survive in that particular scenario, in those scenarios, and those adaptations become learned behaviors that move on into adulthood, um, oftentimes. Or those betrayals occur in previous relationships, and so someone is very weary of entering into the same sort of level of relationship or depth or whatever. They'll keep themselves somewhat protected or walled off in some ways. So, it comes down to um, the value and importance that someone puts on being in relationship will determine how much work they're willing to do on themselves in order to achieve that. And for someone who is a partner of that person or a friend of that person, and they feel that that person has some barriers to going as deep as they want to go or become as connected as they want to connect, um, um, it gets tricky because they can certainly say, hey, I want a deeper connection with you, and I feel there's a wall here that's keeping us from being as connected as we possibly could be. What do you think about that? There's this expression of what it is I want, what I feel I'm not receiving from you, um, sharing that, and then asking how you relate to what I just said is about the best we can do, I think. It's the best we can do to keep ourselves out of the losing strategy of control
Mhm.
and unbridled, I'm going to dump on you what I'm not getting from you, which is called unbridled expression, or retaliation, I'm going to get back at you because you haven't given me what I want. How we can stay out of these unhelpful strategies and also stay off what's called the drama triangle, stay off that of I'm going to persecute, rescue, or victimize, is just to be really clear about what were our hopes and wants and desires are with this other person.
Mhm.
And then get curious about how that all lands on them. And that determines whether we can move forward or not, or whether we can make a choice to move forward or not, or at what level we're going to choose to continue to be in friendship or relationship.
At the very beginning, you mentioned the Gottman, right? The three engagement
Freestyle.
types or styles of engagement.
Mhm.
And I was at least in the last minute or two reminded or like reflecting on that what you and I are currently doing seems to be mostly this kind of not like incredibly like intellectualizing, oh, you know, the mechanics is like exactly this, but it seems mostly on this more abstract level. And one of the questions that I'm also having still is to what extent you intuitively think or feel that the experience of playful engagement itself, regardless of content, regardless of any kind of, certainly no propositions being exchanged, can in itself provide at least a kind of felt sense of positive relationality. So, for instance, if I imagine I'm getting into this kind of tangle with a friend
Hmm.
and saying, okay, we at some point want to look at that, but before we do that, let's actually do something together that we both like, that we feel is a relational activity. And it could be, let's play a game of tennis, let's
Hmm.
go
Hmm.
do this or the other thing together,
Yep.
even just to fully bind on this experiential level and say like we are in experience together,
Mhm.
and from that foundation then actually make a move. Okay, do we now feel well enough, and then
Yep.
move to the
Yeah,
disentangle the tangles.
exactly. Yeah, no, introducing, having a certain level of play and ex sharing enjoyable experiences, mutual joy, enjoyable experiences together, I think is key to bringing in what's called a positive sentimental regard into whatever tangles you're trying to work through, right? So it's those moments of play and fun and humor and, the stuff that isn't so serious, just kind of,
Hmm.
you know, enjoying activities together that build the foundation of, and this is another Gottman concept, of positive regard for the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you think about your friend or your partner or whoever very fondly, like, wow, I really love this person because of X, Y, and Z. Because I remember so fondly these experiences we've had together. That was so fun and just really great. I loved that time. You know, that is going to influence how you come to the table to address a tangle,
Hmm.
right? So, yeah, those moments are super important. And what make, I think those are those are the moments that um, are, so quintessential to any relationship is the play and the fun you have together.
And it seems to me a little bit like the image of, like certainly a type of investment, but like tending to the fields,
Mhm.
tilling and doing all of the stuff so that at some point you can almost like harvest this in the time of the tangles, or
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
and
it's kind of like as Terry Real says, and I love this, is, you know, when working through tangles, remember love. Whether it's your partner, whether it's your deep, a good friend, someone you have some conflict with, even your work colleagues, it's just kind of remember love
Mhm.
and remember life. What does life ask of us in relationship? It certainly doesn't ask of us to be walled off. I mean, it's vibrant, it's energetic, everything's connected to everything else, in life. So it's kind of like just remembering these things and bringing it as an attitude, I guess, if you will, to a tangle.
Mhm. Yeah.
Where I think things go sour for folks is they come in to a discussion or a difficult conversation or conflict full of a bank of negative sentiments. Well, you did this thing last night, you did this thing last week, you always do XYZ, and it really pisses me off, blah, 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 I'm just full of resentment and bitterness right now, and I'm coming at you with all of it.
As a therapist, have you found any good advice that you would give people who at least recognize that that is probably not the best pattern, and who also recognize, yeah, I think I'm doing that. So what can those people do
Well, I
generally
just go
in meeting?
back. Yeah. I just ask them to go back to, okay, what was it that drew you to this person in the first place? Remember back as to remember, you've gone through several years of relationship or friendship or whatever it is. And all of these things, incidences and things have happened in your time together, and you've built up this bank of negativity because they were unpleasant, right? That's usually what happens. Um, and so it becomes okay, let's go back in time for a minute and remember this person that you chose to be in relationship with. What was it about them?
Mhm.
And usually what they can see is that those core qualities that drew them to this person in the first place have not changed. They're still there. And so it's a lot of just, okay, it's kind of like what you are in relationship with, or what you connect to in a person is what you focus on. So we're always in connection. I think we're always connected to people. Whether we're connected to what we love about them or what we hate about them is, that's the thing that's what we're connected to, what we're focusing on about them. So if I focus on all of your faults and flaws and all of the pain and upset we've had, then yeah, that's what I'm connected to in you. But you are so much more than that. So let's explore what else is there. Let's explore what brought us together. Let's explore what I love about you. Let's explore all of that too. And when I come in, and yes, we may have about 2 or 3 years of tangles built up over time that we haven't addressed. Well, let's start unpacking those. And let's do it from a place of remembering what it was I love about you.
Mhm.
So it's an active, and in terms of like interventions for this or exercises, I have couples go into, you know, saying, like leaving little notes for one another of appreciation, um, ending their day with appreciations, um, big or small, just trying to, help them change their mindset a little bit, offer bids of, connection to one another, respond to bids of connection, things like that. So that it builds up this more of a positive sentiment towards one another, and that they can come in and then deal with the conflicts from there.
Which is kind of where we started when you said, love and care is really the foundation. That if that is missing, sure, you can express the tangles, you can express the tension, you can express all of that, but it's unlikely to be resolved. It's unlikely to be integrated or lead to an upgrade of the relationship, let alone really kind of a like satisfactory outcome for either of the people in the relationship.
Right. And it's also without that there, the the energy to do the hard work can be lacking.
On that one, I had at least one additional question. I'm curious about what do you feel is the connection or relationship between love and care as a stance or a feeling or an approach, and imagination as almost a faculty of vision, of like having some sort of faithful belief in the positive direction in which a relationship could go. And I'm asking this because my really broad intuition about life as a process or aspect of reality is that when everything that comes about through life at some point wasn't there and then it's there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it really kind of creates this uh, impossible thing that generates something out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And for that to happen, well, that's in my imagination at least,
Yeah.
something needs to be imagined, something
Yeah.
needs to be
Mm-hmm.
thought into existence that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I can at least I intuit that if I bring only love and care to the relationship, but have no clear understanding of like where could this go in a positive direction, it
Mm-hmm.
also is very difficult to actually end up there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Which is also why I think it's important in friendships, relationships, to be able to express that. Like, here's what I imagine for us. And this is actually an intervention too that we do with couples of talk about what you imagine your relationship could be,
Mhm.
or talk about what you imagine you want. You know, project yourselves into the future together. What does that look like for you? What do you imagine yourselves doing together? Or, what do you imagine what sort of turn do you think your friendships will take? Like Rhonda and I, my friend, we said, yeah, we're going to travel together. I love traveling. Let's do it together. Okay, so we have times where we pick places we want to go and we travel. That kind of thing. So it is this, yeah, what do we want to, how do we want this to look? And then that's kind of dreaming into, imagining into what's possible
Mhm.
together.
It's maybe a bit of a personal question, but do you currently see yourself in friendships where you have imaginations about where they could be going? And otherwise, I'm happy to speak about the same thing because that it is certainly both a source of even like joy for me to think about. Oh yeah, like with this particular friend. So for instance, I have a friend I made through him at some point interviewing for a role at my workplace,
Hmm.
and then us keeping in touch, and
Hmm.
that developed into, like we're not like the closest of friends, but we are friends. And he
Yeah.
moved to Spain maybe
Hmm.
like 9 months ago or so, a year ago. And I can certainly see, yeah, like given now the physical distance, it could also just like taper out or like, fizzle out.
Yeah.
Or what is then the imagination? How would this look like? And to
Yeah.
be relatively, at least, not like concrete and like, oh yeah, let's meet at least every other year by you coming here or me. Like that seems too rigid.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
at least to have on the tapestry of the future, on kind of like the bulletin board of what could happen. Here's the what could happen bulletin board to
Hmm.
be very clear. Oh, this could happen and it would be fun for both of us.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Um, so when you say that, Jochen, I'm like, yeah, definitely keeping open the possibilities of what could happen with you and your friend, how you might travel, how you might meet in places, and then you suggest just making that request, right? Hey, I would love to hang out with you. I'd love to see you. How about I come to Spain? Or how about you are welcome? I'm inviting you to New York, or whatever that looks like, right? Making that request. I think a snag that a person can get into is becoming overly attached to a desired outcome, such that it becomes sort of an expectation, or, if you start moving into the realm of expectation, you can move into a realm of setting yourself up for something that's not going to happen and feeling disappointed when it doesn't, all of that sort of thing. But I think imagining into possibility is definitely a fun, joyful, healthy thing to do, as long as there's a mutuality in it, I guess you could say, or a clear expression of it.
And I'm at least now becoming even more deeply grateful um, that the last vacation trip that I took to Japan and Korea was punctuated by meeting three people, three friends, where especially the last of which, when I went back from Korea to Japan and was at a hotel in Tokyo, and then a friend of mine who lives in China, who I had told I would be there, just like had a few weeks before the trip said, "Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna come to Tokyo."
Mm,
And
hmm
of course, I was like, that would be great fun.
hmm
And yet not getting attached. But
hmm
then when it happened, I really kind of also was so deeply moved
hmm
by him just like saying, sure, I haven't seen Jochen in like a couple years, and he's a great guy, but like we're not close. We haven't for the last few years exchanged weekly messages or anything. But to
Right.
say, yeah, there was someone who really kind of it felt somehow important for both of us to do that.
hmm
And then he came and we spent 2 fantastic days together. And
hmm
for me to really again appreciate just the richness of the texture that has added to this trip.
hmm Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, yeah. I know I can say that I've had similar experiences with a couple people at Emergent Commons who I've met in real life. It's like been, wow, this is great. The possibility of, and there's one person in particular who's originally from Portland. And so, I'll see him when he comes to visit his family, and we get together and we talk for hours. And it's we've said, okay, this is great. The possibility of being able to meet in person and have these conversations is really, really nice, and we'll keep this up if we can, you know. So yeah, yeah. And it does. There is a sense of gratitude, feeling a lot of joy in that. And as well, this is really meaningful to me that you want to take the time and the effort, and I want to do the same for you. So.
No, really, I'm just sensing into if there's any still unexplored topic somewhere that feels wants to poke its head
Yeah,
out of the grass. What
right.
about me? Um, but yeah, like if this may be just what what we speak about today.
Right.
And I can already say, Leslie, um, you and I haven't had many one-on-ones, but the
Mm-mm.
conversations that we have had definitely have given me a lot of faith that today would be a wonderful conversation, and it has way more than paid off.
Oh, I'm glad you.
Like this,
Yeah,
I really feel very, very glad that you and I got to talk. And
yeah,
yeah, I'm already like, I hope you'll have a good trip to the UK coming up.
yeah, yeah.
And
Thank you.
then when you're back, I'm looking forward to reconnecting then.
Sounds great. Me too. Yeah, I was very much looking forward to this. I love this topic of relationship and friendship. It it's very much in line with, I kind of feel, my life's work is in this,
Hmm.
in helping people through
Yeah,
these. So I appreciate the opportunity to have this talk with you. Thank you.
absolutely my pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Have a good afternoon and until the next time.
Thank you, Jochen. You be well.
Bye bye.
Bye.